Hello everyone, it's Leon and I am here with Phil.
Hello.
Who has been playing Beyond Two Souls and has given it a what out of 10?
An 8 out of 10.
Cool. Now, last time you played it, I got the impression you thought it was sort of... When it went in a heavy rain direction, it was at its best, and when it tried to be sort of what we consider to be a game with action, it maybe wasn't as successful.
Yeah,
Is that something you still stand by?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, this is a good scene, a good example of its heavy rain-ness. So you're a very young Jodie Holmes. I think this is maybe the youngest that in the whole timeline of her life. And this chapter, you're just bored in the house, and you're coming to terms with living with Aiden, the spirit thing that you connected to, and he tries to kind of freak you out or kind of play games with you because you two are just kind of bored in the house. And it's quite slow paced, and it feels really weird at first because it's not it's nothing like a game. But then I don't know, something about living in that time and place really connects you with the character and connects you with what it must be like to grow up with something as unnatural as Aiden with you. And then later on in the game, well, actually, all the way through the game, because it's told discontinuously, there are much more video gamey sections, like a hospital full of fire and dead people, very sort of sci-fi tech facilities and things like that.
It's quite a disjointed timeline. It's not a game. You don't play through her life in one go, do you?
No. And I thought when I got the preview code and I was playing through, there's a very M. Night Shyamalan moment there. The game's full of that, actually. I thought that they'd just done that because it was preview code. Like, let's just give you a little sample of Jodie Holmes' life. But the whole game plays out like that. You just flip back and forth, and I'm not really sure what you gain as a player from that.
Do you ever feel like you know what's going on, or is it just one sort of disjointed moment after another?
They're fairly disjointed. I mean, it does obviously make a lot more sense towards the end, but there's not like a big clever kind of memento, one timeline's going backwards, one's going forward or anything like that. It is just jumbled up as far as I can tell for the sake of it. And I think it would have been a bit more impactful if you do some of the rite of passage moments that exist in the game in order. I think it would have been... you would have really gone on a journey with her instead of kind of just experiencing everything in disparate chapters.
Okay, so although it is told in sort of disjointed chunks, what is the kind of the story sort of from start to finish, even though it's not played that way?
Yeah. So Jodie is from birth connected to this entity called Aiden. You hear the word entity about 4,000 times in the game. And there is life through Aiden's eyes, so you can flip out. I think it's triangle that switches between the two. You've got control over either Jodie or Aiden through most of the game.
So you can freely flip between the two. It's not like scripted, which is one of the things that the previous Quantic Dream games have done. Is that they say this is what you do at this point, this is what you do at that point, and he's made a point of this being much more open. Yeah,
I mean it's still there are still constraints in the way, and you get a fairly heavy kind of elbow in the ribs when the game wants you to switch to Aiden. But yeah, Aiden exists from birth, and that puts a strain on your relationship with your parents who don't understand why you're so weird, and so eventually you're given up to the CIA and you grow up in a test facility, and there Willem Dafoe, who plays Dr. Nathan Dawkins, becomes your sort of surrogate father. He's excellent in it, as is Ellen Page. I mean, she's astonishing in it. She's really the glue that kind of holds this whole mad experiment together. If you'd have put, Kristen Stewart or anyone else in the role, I don't think it would have worked. I think really it's testament to Ellen Page's versatility that it is so playable.
But this is another point you raised as well, didn't you? So that William Dafoe and Ellen Page are amazing, and all the other guys and all the other actors are sort of like kind of dog food commercial level jobbing actors.
Yeah, there is a disparity in terms of their performance and also their visual fidelity. So sometimes you'll be sort of walking past someone on the street as Jodie Holmes, and your face will look like Uncanny Valley, and you'll be walking past, like a start of this generation poser model. And so, that exists, but actually, on the whole, the game looks fantastic. I mean, that was the first thing we saw was like a close-up of Ellen Page's face. That was the reveal. Yeah. It was always going to be taken for granted that the facial animation was going to look great. But the light and shadow also looks really good. The environmental design is also really nice and varied. It's a strikingly attractive game at points. There are also points like this in which it doesn't look astonishing. When it gets it right, it looks fantastic.
So what we're seeing some of the controls here. What are the sort of the interactions that you use this time? Is it the same sort of thing of just a lot of QTEs and sort of
yeah? I mean, it's entirely QTE driven once again. I'd say it's a more discreet version of Heavy Rain's control set. So there are fewer flashing X's on the screen and more tiny dots that means you have to tap the right analog stick in one particular direction.
It's more about sort of matching her movements, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of anticipating, whether you'd have to lift something up, you would flick the right stick up, or whether you want to move to the right, then you flick the stick to the right, and it works generally quite well. There's always the debate about whether QTEs kind of strip away the explicit control to the extent that it's not a game anymore. I think if it's used in a manner that enables enough variety in situations. If it puts you in enough, completely different situations, then it works. And Beyond almost takes that to an extreme, to a fault. I mean, there are so many different situations and so many kind of bespoke set pieces that it almost feels like there are 5 or 6 games in here at times.
I was going to ask, so what are the things that you are sort of doing in terms of gameplay? Because obviously now you can move around more freely. What are you doing? Because it's obviously not a game where you find the key to the door and you shoot the people from behind the cover all the way through. What are you actually doing when you're interacting in these scenes?
I guess the easiest way to explain it is that you're sort of acting out the scene. So, I mean, most of the time you're exploring and just interacting with the people and the objects that are around you. I mean, it's always going to be really cinematic. It's a David Cage game. It's Quantic Dream, and I think to kind of get past that, you really have to sort of approach it like you're acting in the scene in the same way that Ellen Page is. So, when you're not kind of, I mean, I guess it plays more like a video game when you're Aiden, because you've got the freedom to sort of whiz about and just mess around with things, push barrels over and mess with people. When you're Jodie Holmes, it really is about just playing the part of Jodie Holmes and just going when you're supposed to go, saying the things that you're supposed to say, that kind of deal.
Okay, and do you get the impression that there's a lot of kind of variation in the things you do? We've seen like options for conversations, and there's different things you can do in different points. In the past, Cage said, for example, on the train, there's points in the train where if you're captured, and that's where the story branches from.
Yeah.
Can you sort of feel that at work, or do you just you don't know? You just get what you get.
There are moments when you're quite clearly making a big decision, and the game's going to change its whole story depending on what you choose. And sometimes
how many endings are there? Sorry, there are
23 apparently. I haven't seen them all. I'll be quite honest. There are moments. Sometimes it's dealt with quite plainly, like, do you kill this person or let them live or something like that, and it's going to have a big effect. There are other times when you're sort of manipulated into feeling a certain way and behaving in a certain way, and it's a bit subtler, and then you only realise afterwards, like, oh, I didn't have to do that. I wonder what would have happened if I'd have done it the other way.
Okay, I asked about the story earlier, and we got away from it. Yeah. So she's handed over by her parents. She grows up to be a literal CIA spook.
Yes.
Goes off and does
very good
army. Goes off and does like army manoeuvres and Afghanistan stuff, and then ends up as a homeless person. I mean, do you ever know where it's? I mean, we don't want to spoil the ending, but
no.
Does it feel like you're going towards something, or there is an overall arc? Is there something you can sort of sum up the story with as what's actually happening?
Well, I think, the incentive, the carrot that you're given to keep on playing is to sort of just make sense of Jodie's life. I mean, by the time you are sort of homeless on the street, you sort of realise how it's got that way, because there's always the danger you feel right from being a kid with the CIA that you're being sort of weaponised and exploited, and that's told quite vaguely at first, and then as you swap back and forth between teenage chapters like this and sort of the present day, it's made more explicit. But yeah, I mean, the carrot that they're dangling in front of you is more just to make sense out of her life than it is to to fulfill a particular mission.
Okay then, so strengths and weaknesses, what are its strengths?
Okay, so it's got a great performance from Ellen Page and from Willem Dafoe as well, some of the most human video game characters that you'll come up against, and when of the many things that David Cage throws at you, the things that work really work. So there's the homeless chapter and some of the scenes when you're a child, they're really poignant because they're not very action focused and they're very different to what you play in video games generally.
Okay, and weaknesses?
And weaknesses, there are occasional dips in script quality, I'd say. Some strange chapters where you get to the end and you wonder, what did that benefit, me from the story.
But does it work mechanically? I think that's what
Mechanically, it is quite slick. I mean, if you hated Heavy Rain and begrudge QTEs to your death, then you'll still hate it. But I don't have a problem with QTEs. I think it works really well.
Cool. Okay, thank you very much. 8 out of 10, everyone. Leave a comment. We'll speak to you later.